Wait, what's that? What? Hey, I believe the 4 unicorns of the Singularity are coming. Hey guys, they're right over there. Come on, let's go. Woo! Yeah.
Let's go, everybody.
All right, come on.
Woo! What's that?
That's the
I believe the 4 unicorns of the Singularity are coming. Hey guys, they're right
I'm just a robot. Robots of the Singularity.
Oh, which predicament?
Dun,
There's
dun,
never
dun,
been more triumphant
dun,
ending to the show.
dun, dun.
So cringy.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
everybody behind us? I didn't even see.
Yeah, they're making
Nice.
it. Some of them are going extra slow.
I didn't hear a lot of singing. That's okay.
Yeah, you guys, come on.
Everybody just stop to smell the roses right here.
Okay, that's all right. Oh,
Well,
After the
thank you,
courtesy
Shadow.
calls.
I mean, that's what we're trying to do today, right, everybody? So, welcome to Endgame. We're talking about the future. Usually, we're weighing sort of how pessimistic and how optimistic we are, and we're going to try to make an effort to lean optimistic.
that's all right.
But we want to make sure we're balanced, and so that means, I guess, we're stopping to smell the roses and appreciate what might happen instead of living in fear of the coming collapse, which some of us are. Psych. So
It's at least a few years off.
So let's start just talking about optimism and pessimism. And like the reason this came up was someone was talking about how most like modern science fiction is like extremely pessimistic, or like at least when you look at like utopian and dystopian futures, like yeah, we're always dystopian. So why is that, do you think?
Because it's interesting.
Yeah,
Okay, Lau, you
That's the
solved
honest
it.
answer.
that's kind of what I was thinking. Well, first of all, it's easier to come up with a negative scenario, right, than a positive one. But also, the negative scenario has a lot more drama in it. So you're going to be able to find a story in that much, you know. But when we're looking at the story of where we're actually going in real life, you know, fiction is also our models for kind of what we can imagine, like how Star Trek has formed the our idea for how a lot of technology should be. And so when we started to envision computers and 3D printing and everything, like that sort of
Sliding
fiction.
doors.
I guess that's an example. And sliding
Right out of
doors.
Star Trek.
That's an example of an optimistic one, but most of them, I think, are not like that. We've got 1984, we've got Brave New World, even the first science fiction examples like Frankenstein, and even things like The Time Machine, who was that, H.G. Wells? Like, that didn't paint like an optimistic future of humanity. We like devolve. So it has a history of being pessimistic.
And I have like the popularity of Black Mirror. Like that's something that we love here, but that's like very pessimistic. What were you
I feel
gonna
like
say?
a lot of
it. Huh? Go ahead.
Just going to say that there seem to be a lot of cautionary tales through literature too, though. I mean, you know, a lot of the same messages: be careful of what you wish for, and so on.
So
Yeah,
is that because? I mean, according to Lau and maybe what you guys are talking about, like, so it might not be that we're attracted to that side of it, but it is just more exciting in fiction because like it actually creates a conflict, and like without conflict you don't have a story. Like so you basically need to introduce like an antagonist or like some kind of whatever. And so that's why we okay. I mean that makes sense. Like because you sort of think about why aren't there more stories of just butterflies and fun and rainbows and shit.
I actually think that it is in fact because humans are more wired towards negativity, not because we're necessarily negative people, but evolutionary speaking, you know, we take into consideration the negative aspects, you know, the worst case scenarios, because if something bad happens, we have to figure out a way around it. If something good happens, we can just roll with it. So we always are thinking about the negative things over and over and over and over again. And so that bleeds into our fiction, that bleeds into our future, that bleeds into pretty much every aspect of our lives. And that's why I think fiction is extremely important with negativity, because it's all about our stories, it's all about our experiences, it's all about our dreams and risks and all of that. And because all of that is focused around, ooh, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if? That we tend to fixate on this negative aspect rather than thinking about, okay, what if the positive happens? How exciting would that be? Stuff like that.
The way you're sort of talking about it, it doesn't sound like a problem. Like, this sounds like that's fine if that naturally that's what happens.
You would think so, but then we have this over-proliferation of negativity. And so when we go to build for a better future, what are we stuck with? We're stuck with the negative ideas. We're stuck with the negative pictures and visions and stuff like that. And so when we go to build, like, I'm sure you're going to talk about it later, but when we were talking about social media, for example, this is highly negative stuff. When anybody who uses Facebook, Twitter, whatever, we don't necessarily view that as positive. We look at it as things we're stuck with. We're like, oh, I got to do that Facebook, or Twitter is going to crap. Fake news and all this. We talk about all these social media and stuff like that, not because it's positive or because it's what we should be doing, but because it's like manipulating on our negative mindsets. It's manipulating on that I guess that's, what's the word, that tendency
instinct
to think of, yeah, exactly, tendency and instinct to think of negative stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. If I could say something, I think in literature and movies, fiction, we tend to see that tendency, kind of as we see in like evening news. We tend to see all the worst things happening everywhere because if it was simply nothing happened here today, it was all good. People would just ignore it and be okay, nothing to worry about then.
Exactly. So if you were able to do an experiment and have a bunch of fiction, and you had positive fiction and negative fiction, like negative fiction would probably sell better. It just gets eyeballs. It's like the news is out to make money. They need to sell commercials, and so it's capitalism. And that's what's going to bring people in. What happened to Popo?
But will it though? What is?
Yeah, Nomoshi was doing something with her headset, I believe, and then she walked backwards, and then she just vanished.
Oh yeah.
Well, I like to
vanish into thin air.
I like to imagine she transcended. Like, that's the optimistic view. Like she finally
into the
found
singularity.
some kind of peace.
Yeah.
Wait, did you have a thought over there?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on top of what you were saying anyway, which is with the whole negative thing, you get a lot more out of it. When you tell your friend, hey, this happened in the news, this was really good, you get like, oh, that's pretty cool. But when you have something you can be angered about, something that you can be outraged, that you can discuss, that you can put your point, your view, and just really start defending it, you start getting more of that, and I hesitate to call it this enjoyment, because it's something to do. It's something to focus on, to take away from our day-to-day. And I think that's why a lot of people love the negative stuff. And I say, again, love in a very loose way, because it's what they crave. It's what they thrive on.
Yeah, fixate on it.
Maybe.
So I just wanted to add on top of it.
Maybe it's
go
the
ahead,
feeling
Dojo.
that. I mean, maybe with negative news stories and things like that, it's like, even if you couldn't possibly solve something on the other side of the world or something, getting together and kind of thinking about it and complaining about it seems to have some merit. Like, you might contribute to it somehow.
Exactly. Now let's take that. You said complaining about it, right?
It feels responsible somehow.
Yeah, exactly. We have that feeling of responsibility through complaining. But we all know complaining is only the first step, to actually solving a problem. The problem with current technology and where we're going right now is that it's focused on dystopian visions, because we stop at the first step. We take a complaint, we take a problems in the world, and we complain about it, and we talk about it, and we gossip about it. but we don't go further. We don't think about how to fix it, and then we don't create the actions to fix it. Why? Because we're focused on that first step. And so a lot of the technology today, I argue, is based on this negativity, is built on negativity, because it only encourages you to stop at the first step, at just complaining and gossiping. There's no technology. There's not much technology out there that forces you or encourages you to go beyond and go and create something.
You sort of talk about like learned helplessness or hopelessness or whatever. Like as a society, that's sort of happening.
Exactly. And so I think it's
Oh, sorry, just saw Fairy there waving. You have a question?
Oh, Fairy, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry. So I think that there's like multiple factors in why so much of our fiction is so dystopian. I've watched multiple videos saying that it's really likely that we have an instinct, like, to pay attention to the negative. Like, that could be a wolf over there. And so our minds evolved to be geared to pay attention to the negative. Also, why we might not get necessarily enjoyment out of negative stories might not be the word, we're stimulated, which is kind of more positive than like being empty or depressed. I think that as human beings we crave stimulation. Yeah. The other thing I think is that we are in some ways culturally geared to fear things that are new and apply common sense to everything. And our common sense keeps us in this area of what's here and now is what's normal. But what's out in the future is scary and weird. I think all these things together is what's created that.
Yeah, totally.
That's well said. Well said.
And it kind of points to the issue where, like, if we're going to work towards a better future, we have to, like, it's already hard enough to build systems and to create environments that work well and are efficient and are, the best possible for the biggest number of people. But we also have to work against our own nature as we're doing that, which means we have to work hard in order to do that. And I think, I hope we're willing to work hard to do that.
Yeah, perhaps another reason for things like fiction focusing on the negative is it's much easier to find a problem than to figure out a solution.
Right.
Yeah. It's stopping at step one. Well, let's try and let's make an effort now and steer that other direction. And we're going to forget about the predator in the jungle and we're going to look up. Oh, fuck, I should have written down that Stephen Hawking quote. I'll find that in a minute. So before we do that, though, I kind of want to take the temperature of the room. So if you're feeling generally optimistic, can you do an emoji thumbs up? And if you're feeling generally pessimistic about the future, you do a thumbs down. And go sweep around.
Oh, it looks about half and half. Well, maybe.
I think it's more optimism, but there's definitely some pessimists in there.
Negative.
Voting twice. They're voting twice. We have no idea.
Yeah, they're just being negative. They don't count. Only the positive people. Wait, Karen, would you like to say something?
Yeah, like what Shadow brought up earlier between the positive and the negative and all that. A perfect example, this is happening now, but it's also, I can see it continuing into the future. Pharmaceuticals, they're coming out with some amazing drugs that could help millions and millions of people, but then they price them just because some greedy CEO takes over a company and decides to inflate the price of a drug 5,000%. Nobody can afford it, so people are dying because they can't afford the medication to keep them alive.
Exactly.
This is going to have to start getting government regulated. Pharmaceuticals is going to have to start getting government regulated so people can actually afford to buy the stuff. I mean, fine, Joe Blow is making $1 trillion, whatever. He's getting filthy rich, or the stockholders for that company, at the cost of people's lives.
The other angle to kind of look at that is, well, for one thing, if we're looking at solutions to problems, government regulation might be one solution. Another way to look at it is that, okay, pharmaceuticals are a technology. They're a powerful technology. But the problem with them isn't the pharmaceuticals, right? It's the economy that has all these patterns in place that keep, that keep access from other people, or from the people that need them, right? So only a select few are going to have the resources to access this technology. But a way to look at it might be that the economy is not a natural force. The economy is also a technology, and it's a technology that potentially we may be able to develop alongside of other technologies as well.
I love that too. A lot of people call, free market and the economy as its own thing, its own natural force, but we all know it's created by us. So how can it be a natural force?
Yeah.
It's something that's built on our technology and that grows and changes based on how we mold our technology and our culture. So stuff like medicine and stuff like even food or any other product or materials that we have is based on accessibility and access, in regards to not just being able to get those different products or resources, but also being able to produce those products or resources on your own, without a whole bunch of money or a whole bunch of regulations or a whole bunch of stipulations in the way of you being able to create something.
$17 a dose or whatever, and to go from $17 to what the heck?
It went from like 1350 to what? Yeah, 700 or something like that. It was
Yeah,
ridiculous.
some ridiculous. Yeah, it was 5,000%.
Yeah, it was 5,000%. That was how much he raised it. And I should note, he
You know,
did not go to jail for that. He went to jail for
he
defrauding.
went to jail for fraud. Yeah.
But screwing over poor people
But
was not a crime. Screwing over rich
no,
people
that
was.
no. Yeah.
Exactly.
But the other thing, along the same lines, the one thing I do have optimism for the future is surgeries. Between machines like, let's say, in the last few years, the MRI, the stuff they can do with an MRI is just incredible, and all these little devices that they're inventing, to for non what do you call that? They can actually go in through an orifice instead of actually cutting you open, and fix things.
Operation.
Yeah, and stuff like that. It's just medical technology as far as surgery and that, not including medicines whatsoever. Just the surgery part of it. Some of the stuff they're coming out with is just unreal, and I can just see that getting better and better. In a way that is pretty wild.
Oh, Nuke, were you going to respond to that?
I was just going to add on to the whole thing with the fact that, yeah, medicine is getting ridiculous, but going on with that, even extending it, hospitals, surgeries, everything like that, if you get put in the hospital for something life-threatening, like I've had a family member in the past 3 years have that. If you don't have insurance, even then, you're going to go broke, especially if you live in America. They charge you outrageous amounts.
For the most part. Yeah.
But
Like other countries
that's
don't have
the issue, is that it's so out of our reach, and there's nothing you can do. Like, what are you going to do? Just sit in the streets and die? And that's where I can't see that improving without government regulation in some form, something. Because I mean, look at other countries, other governments. They have better things in place.
For the life of me, I cannot understand how a country like the US of A can not have universal health care. I'm Canadian. I have that. And trust me,
Get it.
I'm happy. I'm happy that we have that.
It comes down to a philosophical difference, right? The people who form the government look at the circumstances and they say, okay, here's what the government, here's what the government is compelled to provide for its citizens things like roads, things like water, things like education. And then some things are not, it's not compelled to provide for its citizens. Some things are, I guess I'm not entirely sure what the like the common denominator value is, but it's something like if you, like your health is not a
Healthcare
civic
is a privilege, not a
responsibility.
right. It's kind of how that
Yeah. There's
Yeah, your,
so
your
it's-
health is not a priority. The almighty dollar sign is.
And that's what's so screwed up. Because you can't get what you need. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just going to suggest bringing this into ways that we could improve the future through medical technology or changes in medical policy.
Yeah, we can
That
go
doesn't
in.
have to be- Is that one
Bring
of
up the 4
yours?
topics.
Is that one of your predictions, or?
It seems like, well, I mean, as Catapult said, it seems to be a direction that there's a lot of a lot of change to be optimistic about. It's not too hard to think of a few ways they're already doing this.
It's improving. I give it that.
Example, I was talking on Discord with Nomino. Kidney stones. At one time, they used to have to cut you open to get rid of kidney stones. Now it's just they shove a tube down, pardon the expression, your pee hole. They knock you out, you shove a tube down there, and they go and fetch it. They actually pull the kidney stone out if it's small enough, and they pull it up. Been there, done that. And so something that would have required a lot more preparation work and surgical work is done quite easily. I think it took him half an hour. I was put out. I was under. So I know it didn't take very long. I was back in the room in pretty much no time flat. He just went in there, got it out, and bang, back to the room I went. And so just that alone, cost-wise, would be considerably less. Less chance of infection, less chance of this, less chance of complications and all that. Less chance, you don't need the medications that you would need if you would have been cut open, so on and so forth. So in a way, that procedure is a lot less expensive than having to be cut open in the past.
Okay, yeah. So thank you, Catapult. I think we can kind of use this to get into what our focus is, which I think we want to try to look at ways this can change, right? Because none of us want it to remain the same. The system is busted. Is there any direction we can go in that might be more optimal?
Well, I can think of a few. I mean, for one thing, Catapult was talking about how much of a difference things like MRI imaging makes. And when you combine that with things like 3D printing, I've heard of cases of someone needed a new heart valve replacement. And they actually did an MRI scan of his heart, or of their heart as it was, designed a new heart valve, 3D printed it, and then took them to surgery to do the replacement. So they already knew exactly what shape it had to be before they started any kind of operation.
Oh, that's awesome.
But we're also seeing a lot of advancements in 3D printing for things like prosthetics, where it may not be state of the art, but say small children who might be missing a limb or have a problem with their hand or something, rather than being fitted for multiple $1,000 or tens of thousands of dollar hand every few years and having it get out of size and things like that. They can simply get open source plans for a decently functional 3D printed hand and make it for $20 or $50. When they need to adjust it or get a bigger one, they can just print one out for cheap.
Awesome.
I think another good way to. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I see 3D printing for prosthetics being a big game changer as people can start doing this at home.
Oh yeah, that's a huge thing right there. But I wanted to have Quaz over there. He was over there signaling.
Yeah. So I've been watching a lot of YouTube lately, last couple of months, and I've been looking into robotics. And many scientists who work in the field think that by 2030, which is like, well, oh wait, that's my alarm clock just Do you guys hear it?
Yeah,
You know,
Isn't there
I
any-
was.
You're
Oh, I'm so
transcending.
sorry. You know, no, I put the alarm. So you know, I'm in the Netherlands, and I put the alarm 20 minutes to 4 at midnight, so I could be here. But yeah, anyway, so that's that. Yeah, it's anyway.
It worked, you said.
Many scientists who work in robotics actually think that by 2030, 50% of all jobs will be replaced by robots. And the way I look at money is nothing else than how do I put this? Money is basically knowledge and energy that we transfer to each other. You know, when I go to a hairdresser, the reason why I pay this person money is because she had to put in effort, which is energy, and she had to gain knowledge. And in order, you know, and trade for that energy by cutting my hair and gaining knowledge, I will give her money. But if robots are taking over many of our jobs, it's going to make money much less of an important factor as it is today. Because if robots are doing all the stuff for us, money is going to cost a lot less. And I think, well,
Who pays for the
that was
robots?
kind of stupid. But anyway, so I think when robots are going to take over a lot of our jobs, that's actually the moment when things are really going to head off for our society. I think lots of good things will happen by then, because if as soon as we don't have to put in energy anymore, if we don't have to put in lots of energy for gaining knowledge, then money kind of fades away. And you know, if it's kind of hard, but in Dutch language, I'm usually a little bit better at explaining my point. But I think money is going to become a lot less important when robots are going to take over way more jobs for us. And from then on, I think many good things will happen. Just imagine if we can send out 3D printers to it's already happening in China. They 3D printed some houses for $5,000. And I can imagine, you know, we don't have to put in that much energy anymore. We just get some resources. Maybe later on, they get robots will pick up those resources for us to build houses, and the robots themselves will also make the houses for us. And so from that moment on, when we have those technologies, we can just send robots who are powered by solar panels, like miniature solar panels, maybe, and they will go there and do all this stuff for us. For example, in Africa, they will print out houses and everything, and it's not gonna, you know, from that moment on, I think, yeah, my point didn't come across very clear, I guess, but
Oh, we definitely did,
yeah, I'm sorry about that. No, that's good. That was kind of stupid. I realized. But I think within 12 years or so, many robots are going to take over many of our jobs. Governments will have to, I think governments will have to force companies to work together with them, because as soon as robots are going to replace many humans, we cannot have those people have no income and no job. So I think when that happens, governments need to say to companies, okay, you are allowed to replace your human workers by robots, but if you do so, an amount of your income is going to go to these people, because otherwise society won't be able to run and everything. But I think when I was looking at all these videos and all the hearing all these scientists talk, I think we're like 15 years from now, we're in a way more positive future than we are right now. And also, I looked into some statistics about people who are getting an education at the university. All the great people who did all this amazing stuff for us, like virtual reality, computers, and all the nice technologies. When they were at the university, that was like 30 years ago, and right now we have double the amount of people who graduated from university. So in the upcoming years, we will have more than double the amount of people working on really good things in the world than we had like 30, 40 years ago. So I think I'm very optimistic, but
So I
Go
really
ahead.
like your conceptualization of money as, not a end in
It's
itself,
energy.
right? Money is right. It's knowledge, it's energy, it's time, and it's been
Mhm.
abstracted. You take all of that stuff and you put it into a unit, and then we give value to that unit. And I think from that perspective, I think robots, taking over a whole bunch of manual labor is going to be a really interesting change, and I think that's going to shift. But there's also going to have to be a
Absolutely.
philosophical shift, because if you
Mhm.
see, if you have a bunch of knowledge and time and resources that's been abstracted and encapsulated, it's kind of like, looking at it from that perspective, it's a little bit perverse to hoard that, and especially for companies to hoard that. These active, like, participating elements that actively build society, like, they're hoarding all these resources when their role should be to distribute them, to further build out the
Mhm.
system. And just grabbing it all and holding it, like, that doesn't make any sense unless you see money as an end in itself. Like, that's the end goal, is to get money. But if you see it as knowledge and energy, then you will want to take that and do something with it. And I think that has to be a part of our transformation, is coming to a different understanding of what our resources are and what value is, and what money means, and all of those
Exactly.
things.
Yeah.
It'll be a turning point for sure. I mean,
I think it's. Sorry.
well, I mean, we do have a long history of, the old archetype of the wealthy factory owner and the oppressed worker, and we're seeing more concentration of wealth than ever lately. So I think it may have to go through a rough patch first, but
Oh
I
yeah.
also agree that as a society, we're going to have to figure out this problem as it comes to pass, that you can't simply find another job that hasn't been automated.
Yeah,
It seems like this time it's moving up the chain and taking knowledge workers, and you can't simply go to college and find something else necessarily.
Nimano, what's your read on this? What do you
Well, I'm
what do you think
curious.
is it?
Like, as we're moving from like scarcity to abundance, like that's what you're sort of talking about. Does that not naturally? Do you not think that will naturally solve the philosophy? Like, do you not think, as the hive mind, basically, like as the giant communication that's happening between all of us on the planet, like as the abundance like becomes more obvious to us, like does that not naturally shift our mindset, or do you think there's like yeah?
I think it might, but I haven't seen that happening. So maybe it just hasn't reached an extremity to the point where that shift would occur. But I see institutions and organizations and people that are in abundance, and their attitude has not shifted from the sort of grabbing and hoarding and keeping and hanging on and just building up the stash of money as big as possible.
It's the finite game versus the infinite. So there's like a common, I forgot who said it first, but it's a common saying amongst those, like I believe in the idea of abundance and just progress. Is there's people that play the finite game, which is believing that there's a set amount of winners and you can only have this many people that win, and when you do win, you take everything. Versus the people that believe this is an infinite amount of an infinite game, where the purpose is not to just win. The purpose is just enjoy life, to create and to progress, to give value and stuff like that. And through that side, you will constantly be winning. You will constantly be in a state of success, rather than success being a goal. Success is a path. And
I
so
like that.
there's a lot of, yeah, it's pretty awesome. There's a lot of the old guard that believes in that finite game concept, where you just hoard wealth, like you were saying, and hoard resources. But there's also a growing number of people who know about the infinite game, where it's about spreading out more resources and giving people access. Because once everybody is able to experience success, then the entire world feels more of that success. But that's why I believe that it's actually not natural. It doesn't necessarily happen on its own. It only happens when those people who believe in the infinite game are actually there to push it forward and can have enough people behind them to make it happen.
I think that's a good point, and that I think that also contributes to it is that we are, again, we're fighting against our own nature, because it is in our nature as animals that evolved from other animals, that like all of our instincts tell us to grab the resources as much as we can, because we don't know when they're going to disappear. It's very hardwired into our psychology and thus into our sociology, coming from thousands and thousands and thousands of years of evolution. And so we have to work to reprogram ourselves to think differently from that. And I think it will take place in the collective, in the hive mind, but it has to start somewhere. I don't know if it'll happen on its own. I think we have to provide impetus for it too.
There does seem to be, at least sort of a maybe a gradient or a shift in philosophies as you move up the chain of haves versus have-nots. I mean, obviously, a lot of people with very little resources or wealth think sharing is a great idea, and a lot with a considerable deal more feel that they're entitled to everything they have because they earned it and they shouldn't have to share. But you also see a tendency among the ultra-rich, people like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, who feel a need to give to certain philanthropic causes, and many others in the wealthy community apparently also feel a need to leave a legacy by doing things like endowment funds for universities, buying libraries or giving to other charities.
This is where I actually put forth. Oh, go ahead. You want to finish?
I was just going to say, I don't think we can count on this happening, and we shouldn't rely on it. But there does seem to be a softening of mood as wealth becomes less of a pressing issue.
I actually believe that there needs to be a challenge put forth for actually the ultra rich or anybody that's in the path of success to actually work that harder to push this society forward. Because when you look at something like Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, right, and they say they're going to give away all their money, why are they simply giving away money or putting forth towards a certain cause rather than building a system of constant growth? They made billions of dollars creating these machines that create wealth for them, such as Facebook or Microsoft or whatever. They created these machines that create wealth. So why not create a machine that creates success, or create a machine that spends that wealth for other people for more access and stuff like that? There's a difference, I think, between just giving money out for those causes and creating that system.
Yeah, so that's like a common criticism of charities and stuff, that you can give money to people, but it doesn't actually solve the problem. But I'm curious as to what your idea is about what the system would look like. What would it do?
Oh yeah, so I honestly often think about this a lot. There's different systems we can do, and it always comes down to being able to talk with a bunch of people and figure out what the best system is. But so far, some of the things that we see happening today is blockchain, for instance. You hear a lot about that going on, but it's not just Bitcoin, but whatever that is, how that's going. It's the idea of decentralization of resources and of access. So blockchain, in simple terms, allows you to how I described it before is basically all money, all of basically civilization was based on keeping store or keeping records of events that happen. For when we created money and stuff like that, the people in power were the ones that kept records of events that happen, of money transactions. So when other people go to make their money, they have to come to the record keeper, who would say, okay, I see that you did this transaction. I see you did this transaction. So they had the centralization of resources. They had the centralization of all records and stuff like that. And that's where banks and all that stuff. Right? Yeah, exactly. So that's where they came from. But blockchain allows you to decentralize that, because it says everybody can have access. Everybody can keep their own records of their own events as well as that of everybody else. So why do you have to go to this person, to this wealthy person, to validate your transaction when you can do that yourself between you and your friends? And what that does is allows everybody to have a more equal footing on the playing field. So it creates a system where we can regularly and easily create more value without having to store that value in one place, and thus you don't have anybody that's able to take that hoard, because there is no hoard. There's no store of resources where you can bring towards yourself. It's everybody has their own little pile.
Well,
You see
but
what I'm
even
saying?
in a blockchain system like Bitcoin, people hoard Bitcoin. Like I know they do that. Like they have
Yeah.
piles and piles of Bitcoin.
Yeah,
and that
because
they're
this
not
is just
doing
the
anything with.
beginning. Yeah, this is just the beginning of the system. You know, um, Bitcoin itself is not the best example of what blockchain can be. It's just the first example of the biggest, or the first and biggest example of what it is now. And what we can do is be sure we can build on this. There are other things coming out like Holochain or and stuff like that, where it takes the same idea but decentralizes it more and more. And so you don't have that hoarding of resources.
Okay.
And I think
Shadow?
it's going to come to a point. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead and finish. I just I see kind of a thread forming here.
All right. So I think it's going to come to a point where we can have a sort of decentralization of systems, a system of systems, where you would have everybody can have, like, for instance, if you want to get money, or if you want to get value, if you want to get knowledge, and you can go do whatever you want. You can go play a game, for instance, and you get knowledge for that. You can go make art. You can go make 3D worlds. You can go talk to people. You can go read books. All of these will create their own value in the action of you going to pursue your goal. And together, we would have a system that connects all of these different systems together, so that you would have that shared value as well. But there's no central hoard to gather. There's no, there's no centralization, basically, that's easy, that can corrupt people easily. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I
What
was
were
just
you gonna say, Dojo?
I was just seeing, part of what Shadow's getting at there is he was talking about, sort of the democratization of technology. So, I mean, you have technologies like blockchain or things like 3D printing for prosthetics. I think, maybe one thing, regardless of the hoarding that we keep seeing, is that technology allows us to do more, but it tends to also become cheaper and easier to get. So we're going to see maybe more and more that if a given system doesn't necessarily work for you, you can opt out and choose another one.
Exactly. Yeah.
Say blockchain, for instance. If someone has cornered the market on Bitcoin, you can go to Litecoin or Dogecoin or 10,000 other coins and choose a currency system that people are willing to trade with you, that works for you.
So the system itself is redundant.
Yeah, it's getting to the point where everyone has phenomenal amounts of computing power just in their phones, much less anything else.
Exactly.
You can get, if you're so inclined, you could design and automate a machine that uses open source libraries for computer vision or other sort of control systems, and pretty much design your own systems. So maybe we're getting to more of a positive future through empowering people through readily available technology, if they're just willing to take it.
Exactly.
Little fairy, did you have a comment? Ghoster, look down. No, they're small. You gotta look down.
Hi. First of all, is my microphone working?
Yes.
I don't want to waste your time if it is. Okay. I'm sorry if I'm taking too much time. So on the matter of automation and things like how society is going to change and respond to that, I think that we're finally going to have a true economic revolution. One that ends up much better than what happened in Asia and Europe with the USSR. Because while people today justify all of this inequality by platitudes like, well, they just didn't work hard enough, or they're just lazy. When the majority of the population can't work because it's literally not efficient and nobody wants to hire them, it will be more than like 50% of the population. It will be all over the news, all over social media. It will force a degree of class consciousness that will go to creating at least universal basic income or something further, because we've never seen something like this before economically. It will force a revolution where I don't think the system can sustain itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think
That makes
that's
a lot
it.
of sense.
Thank you, sorry.
Oh, thank you.
No, that's
Yeah,
great.
that.
I
Yeah,
agree.
Perfect.
No,
I'm
that-
really
Mhm.
happy to you.
That's good. And it's kind of, if I could have one more point about the democratization of technology. I think, in cases like that, maybe if the mainstream economy automates too much and shuts you out, maybe independent societies or communes, as they'd be called, don't necessarily have to be people living on farms or in tents anymore. Now that they can do their own automation and make sophisticated machines themselves.
That actually
Exactly.
reminds me, if anybody wants a good example of a piece of fiction that has I wouldn't say it's an optimistic book, but it has an extremely good model of how a post-scarcity economy would work, is Walk Away by Cory Doctorow. It describes a system of building, like just building things, like building buildings and towns and technologies that's essentially based on GitHub and the open source movement. And it was really inspiring for me to read because it was a model I'd never encountered before. Like, I'd encountered bunches of content that said, here's why what we're doing is broken, but so much of it wasn't here's what we could do instead. And that book was a good example of things we could do instead. And it did draw heavily from gift economies and the open source movement, which I personally feel pretty strongly about, and I wish I had more time in my life to contribute to those, because it's really exciting to think about, and like a much more heavily institutionalized open source system.
You'll have more time
yeah.
once you lose your job to a robot.
Right, yes.
Exactly. That's awesome. I love that. Open source all the way.
Yeah, there's a lot of threads here that are sort of coming together in my mind. Like a lot of it comes together for me, and I don't know the right way to talk about this, but I'm just referring to it as the hive mind, right? Like the idea that we're building this nervous system of everyone on the planet and figuring things out together. And as like there is this gap in economics, right, where like the haves and the have-nots are like growing apart, and like it's getting extreme, but the have-nots are like, it is getting better, right? Like the nervous system is not going to let 99% of the cells die. It has to keep them alive and like find a way to even as things like when we talk about optimism versus pessimism, I think sometimes it's just like looking at the good side and the bad side of something, where maybe the super rich are going to get away from us and become immortal gods that go fly around the galaxy or whatever. And that sucks, and we'll be upset with them. But if everyone on the planet can live for 500 years, a super healthy lifestyle, and do whatever we want, it's like that's the that's the
fans. Yeah.
So that's the pro.
Pretty good.
Wait, so we've been going all over the place. Shadow, did we ever get to one of your predictions? Or did you weave
I guess
them
that
in?
system one. I kind of did with that system one.
Oh, good work.
But if you want, I can give a
yeah.
bunch of ideas if you want. Yeah.
Well, let's do one at a time.
Okay. Well, one I think that's really exciting and that people don't really think about is ultimate gamification. I originally kind of like started bubbling about this idea when I first got into virtual reality in this book called Epic by, I think, Connor Kostick. I read it way back, like before virtual reality was a thing and before Ready Player One, anything like that. And this book like was set in a far, far future where society was built on playing a virtual reality game for certain aspects of their economy. They would have a regular aspect, where there would be just gathering fruit or whatever on the planet. But they would go into virtual reality for pretty much anything else. And that started like growing my childhood mind all the way up until today, when I see virtual reality and I see games, I see gamification happening, and I see it as us going to a point where just like what they were saying, what Quaz was saying, where we won't have regular jobs to do because robots are doing all of that. This will be a cause for us to focus on ourselves, because we can essentially play games. That's what humanity does. We play games. We create entertainment for ourselves. We create value. We create things. We are creative beings. And so games are, to me, are like the ultimate way for a society to always provide value and to always find meaning and fulfillment in life. It can get to a point where everybody has a game, where their in-game currency is pays into that system I was talking about earlier, kind of like a blockchain of blockchains, where they're playing a game, whether it's an augmented reality game or a virtual reality game, whether it's a shooter or a quest or just walking down the street and turning that into a game. All of this can come together as a way of people just finding fulfillment in the small things in life, as well as being able to materialize their far-reaching goals in life as well. So it brings the small with the large. It brings, the far away with the close. It brings all of that together to me. Ultimate gamification.
I like that. Bringing it down to like the human level.
I like it too, and I do kind of think that it's a good union of a bunch of different aspects of our psyche and our systems, because like our like a bunch of our I don't know, I read this book once, and I don't even remember what it was called, but it was about games. It was about finding the way to live your life is about finding the right games to play, which games to participate in and which games not to participate in, and what aspects of your life that you turn into a game to play. And it was a really powerful idea, and we as humans, we love playing games, and like even people who love working, I think like they love their jobs or whatever, I think they like it because it's very much like a game to them. They're playing it like another person would play the game, and they're being tactical, and they're weighing all the variables, and they're like, making decisions, and like so that is very, very compelling. And just from how big games have gotten in our economy too, like it's this enormous industry. It's obviously this resource that so far is not utilized for actual production of value for the most part, but perhaps could be. I really like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a cool concept.
So building off of that too, you're very right, and a lot of people want that, they turn things into a game because it makes it enjoyable and also gives that satisfaction. And taking away from how negative I was being earlier, that's where I could see a lot of these systems working. That if you turn these things into a game, you give them that end goal, that thing to reach that everybody strives for in their day-to-day life, and give them the means to achieve that, then you're going to have content people that are more willing to be creative, more willing to be optimistic. And then adding even earlier the whole automation thing, if people have time, they'll have more time to do all this, which means that they'll have more time to contribute, which means more time to build upon what we have, and we can just keep spiraling up and up into a better society that a lot of people all will benefit from. So gamification is always a good thing.
I'm excited about gamification of therapy. So like I talked to Psych before this, and he mentioned AI therapy, which is something I've talked about before that I'm really excited about. Like, imagine sitting, or everyone having access to a virtual therapist that is all knowing and knows, can read you really well and give you sort of individual help. But imagine that it's more like the game in Ender's Game, where it's reading your mind, it's extracting symbols from your subconscious, it's putting them out in front of you, and like you're getting into your thoughts, but it's a game, right? Like you're a hero and you're defeating antagonists, but those antagonists represents the demons that are actually within you, and maybe it could be constructed in a way that will actually like have some kind of benefit, right? Like you cross a couple of thresholds, and then when you come out of the game, you're actually a changed person. And it was really exciting while you were doing it. Oh, I forgot about Psychonauts. Yeah. But they were going like other people's minds. I want to go into my mind and like have an adventure and solve my own problems.
That actually goes into, I think, I'm not sure if you want to mention it now, but Dojo was talking a lot about how a lot of this positive technology can be a negative thing if we are not careful with it, we're not cautious with it. Do you want to go into that? Or
Okay, yeah, I have. You know, we were kind of started talking about AI earlier, and I mean, there are ways it can go right and ways it can go wrong. I think a lot of learning AI as we have it right now, we don't really understand it well, and so you know we can train it to do a certain task very well, and it seems very smart, but it's not intelligent. We don't know why it's doing what it's doing. You know, and if we give it anything outside of its usual parameters, it might fail. It's like we think of it as being naive, maybe like a child, but it's kind of more like a light bulb. You know, in that it just does what it does because of what it is. So I think we have to be very, very careful with how we train it, so it doesn't become superstitious or, you know, take on other anomalies.
It's going to be subject to its initial training parameters, and the initial training parameters are decided by people. And so people's biases and people's flaws and people's like just things that people don't see about the world are going to shape those initial parameters.
But we're all more connected than ever, right? So there's people all over the world maybe developing these things coming from different perspectives. And while some people might fall into a trap or be prejudiced in some way or, you know, whatever, there might be someone on the other side of the world doing something very similar that actually avoids that same trap. And so, like, you know, together we'll find a way.
Yeah, and if we can all talk to each other about it and collaborate, like in maybe an open source artificially intelligence project, you know, so like something like that.
Yeah, and actually, Poplipo, you showed a really interesting link about Google's DeepMind team having a like an ethics team. You know, they're to make sure that their AIs they develop don't develop racist tendencies or other negative cognitive biases. They kind of actively develop mechanisms to train them out of it.
Which is a great first step. I think that having like an ethics board is like bare minimum like due diligence for anybody who's like developing edge technology, you know, like cutting edge technology. But I say that's the bare minimum because it could have it has such far-reaching consequences. Like Namano, if we have a virtual therapist who can read our mind and help us progress as beings, like that's great. And I can see that taking place, but I can also, like, if our economy goes to its natural, like its sort of extrapolated conclusion of extreme capitalism, that same virtual technology is going to be used to read your mind to sell you things better. And and like the consequences of that seem enormous to me. And so like people developing the technology, I hope that they understand their responsibility in the matter. I hope that they're paying attention to that. I think they are. I see a lot of people talking about it, but I don't know for sure.
This is why more people need to have access to create technology in the first place, so you don't have to depend on any broker parties to do it.
Yeah, offer more options available and more innovation.
I'm hearing you, but I still have faith that the hive mind will be self-correcting in a way, right? Like, let's imagine, like, okay, so Facebook is a good example. Facebook has been gaining power for years and it's becoming this huge force. And in recent years, people are questioning it, going like, wait a second, like, is this whole thing just, am I the product? Is it advertising to me? Is it fucking up American politics? Is it whatever? Like, what's happening? Is it putting people, are they becoming more tribal because they're using this one app that we're all using? Like, is it actually having this huge detrimental effect on us? And then people started deciding to leave. And like recently, like the last few months or whatever, is the first time they're experiencing like a drop where like they're no longer growing and people are abandoning Facebook. And to me, that is like the hive mind self-correcting, right? Like we see too much power or it going the wrong way, and then it becoming transparent enough, like nothing is perfectly transparent, but there's enough of us looking around and maybe shouting and going like, oh, there's a problem over here. And if enough of us hear that and we move another direction, we can, I don't know, there's a lot of us. And I feel like we can flow around a lot of these pitfalls.
And we can do that in a way we've never been able to do before. Like we can talk to each other, like in the 1950s, there would have been absolutely no mechanism by which we could kind of hear some sort of group off in the distance, like complaining about some sort of intrusive force on their social life or their mental health. And so there would be no way for us to hear about it and change our own habits in response. Like just the sheer immediacy of how we can talk to each other. It's a really good, that's just a good technological system to have in place.
Yeah, I do want to caution on the idea of a hive mind though, because I forgot what exactly it's called, but there's a couple of sociological tendencies where humans tend to mass together on the wrong ideas because we have tons and tons and tons of what's the word for it? Mental disparities, almost like, yeah, just mental concepts that we kind of fall into, that we don't see ourselves, and until we get to the point where we can modify our own minds to easily see those biases, the hive mind itself would be dangerous, because things like Nazis were created in that hive mind idea. Things like racism was created in that hive mind idea. Things like slavery was created in that hive mind idea. You know, it went over most of the world, you know, based on that hive mind idea. And until we are more able to point out our own, you know, problems in that hive mind, then I want to caution on that.
That's a good point, but I think that there's what is kind of, I think, the distinguishing factor, is that just having a collective or a collective movement or a collective conversation itself on its own is not inherently going to be a destructive thing. But in all of those examples, there was the creation, the virtual creation of an us versus them. You know, this is my in group, that's the out group, so they're the enemy, and they're who we're trying to destroy or denigrate or use, or, you know, like there's always a dividing line between us versus them when that hive mind, or when the groupthink mentality, because I think there is that's the distinction, I think, between groupthink and hive mind.
Yeah.
Like groupthink is when you kind of band together in an us versus them scenario.
I like that distinction, yeah.
Well, there are smaller examples though, like you know, sports fans rioting and deciding to trash a city together, where they, you know, being as part of a group, they feel kind of absolved of responsibility personally, where they might not, you know, have anything out for a cafe owner or something, but they're in a crowd, so they smash a window.
That's true, but again, the whole point there is there's only, like, the thing that gets the team so riled up is that they have an enemy. They get into the war mode because they have an enemy. They defeated the enemy, run, and they go nuts.
Yeah, I'm sort of imagining, like, if you go into the Nazis or into, you know, people that riot at a game or something, like, I'm not thinking of the hive mind as that small group, right? I'm imagining the entire globe. So it would include those bad actors and everyone else, and they have to be in communication with each other. And, like, that's what I mean by self-correcting, right? When those things bubble up and everyone else goes like, whoa, wait a second, like, there's something wrong here, and we can actually have an open dialogue about it. I think that's like the corrective nature, the fact that the different parts of our mind are going to be able to communicate with each other. And, like,
and I don't think we know how to do that gracefully yet, at least from what I see of online conversation. But, like, I think that we'll get better over time. I mean, that's tend to what we tend to do. We get better at, you know, communication is also a technology, communication patterns and communication techniques. Like, it's something that we could develop and improve over time.
Definitely need more communication technology. The catapult.
Yeah, like you were saying about control, you know, mind control and controlling minds, trying to sway people's thoughts. That's been going on for like forever. Way back in the days of television, they used to use a thing called subliminal suggestion. What they would do is, let's say it's a Coca-Cola commercial, and one of the ice cubes in the nice tall glass of ice Coke, and one of the ice cubes, they would actually write the word sex.
Oh, I saw that, yeah.
But it would only last like 2 frames, so basically the conscious mind wouldn't see it, but the subconscious mind would. And that's how they swayed people. Some commercials had like an outline of a perfect silhouette, woman with a perfect body at the time, 36, 26, 36, 24, 36 kind of thing, but it would either be hidden so well that the conscious mind wouldn't see it, but the subconscious would. And that's how they swayed people, you'd watch a Coke commercial and, that's word sex sells. The word sex would show up. You wouldn't see it, but all of a sudden, hey, I'm thirsty for a Coke. Let's go grab a Coke,
But what's different about today versus then was that, like, when that first happened, the people that it was happening to weren't in communication with each other, right? Like, they all fall for the same ad gimmick, whatever it is, and then none of them have any ability to talk to each other. And if somebody does figure it out and goes like, wait a second, this ad company is doing something bad, there's no way for them to tell everyone else. But today there is, right? Like, there might be an ad there. I mean, like, things go viral so quickly. And when there's like a weird advertisement, 15 minutes later, like, there's a million people talking about it and like commenting on it. And I imagine that it would be a different situation today if we found stuff like that.
So we just need more communication.
Are they using
let's go in for the finish here.
Are they still using, even though it got outlawed, subliminal suggestion got outlawed, are they still using something along those lines, in certain things? Like the thing I find so stupid is, let's say I buy something from Amazon.ca, and a couple of days later I go on Facebook, they're showing me an ad for something I just bought. Why in the hell would I want to see an ad for something I just bought?
Part of the point is that, like, well, when it comes to that, like, big data is really powerful, but it's not really that sophisticated yet. So that's interesting. But like, you make a good point that, like, when people benefit from trying to sway the masses and trying to get people to do what to get a lot of people to do what you want them to do, that's powerful. That's what people are going for. And again, in our economic system, like, that's the end goal. You want to get as many people to buy your product as possible so that you'll have money. End of story, So, like, I think that's a symptom of that, and hopefully something that will evolve over time as our economic technologies evolve into a better place.
I think a good way to, I guess, wrap this all together is to think about what would be not just the ideal, but what would be the innovation in communication technologies in order to bring all this together, in order to have a hive mind where it's self-correcting, in which we can communicate on a regular basis. So I guess each of us can think about more ideas of how to open up the technologies today, and how we individually, not just wishing and hoping on different innovations in technology, but how we individually can help further that progress, whether it's through blogging or talking about it, or even using our own skills to create technologies or art, whatever. I think this could be a good way for us to wrap this up on what ideas we can talk about this for that. Yeah.
That's a great point, because like I think about people's perspective now. Like, if you have an Instagram account with like 50 followers, I think that's considered fairly lame. It's like, what, only 50 people give a shit about you? But like, that's a lot of people that you have that you can communicate with. Like, and if you've got some good ideas and you're talking to 50 people, that's great. And if you have hundreds or thousands of followers, like, that's a big influence like that anyone can have.
Yeah, what if we're using that connecting technology you speak of now, and it just hasn't come fully to fruition?
Yeah, I hope that's the case. I hope that we're in the infancy of a truly, like, connected and communicative species of animal. Like, we've grown so far and developed so much from where we've come. It would be such a shame to just destroy ourselves because we weren't quite good enough. We were almost good enough to make it to the future, and then we just couldn't do it, and everything went to shit. Like, that would be terrible.
Yeah, I believe it. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say I don't even know where any of you are geographically, but here we are standing in the same room trying to come up with solutions for the future.
Yeah. And I love that, because the whole world needs to do
it. Exactly. That's pretty awesome. It's like, this is the point in history in which this is very exciting, is that we're at a point in history which is like, this is the last page, after which, whatever happens next will be like the rest of humanity. Whatever we do right now will determine where humanity will go in the future. Will
It's
it
the
go
first
down
day
or
of the
up?
rest of our lives.
You know, exactly. It really is right
Oh
now.
lordy. All right, Quaz, are you gonna finish this?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go real quick. Actually, I think virtual reality. Now that we're talking about it, about people connecting the world, I think virtual reality is gonna help connect the entire planet, all the humans together. I can imagine that in the future we will have translators directly built into our like headsets, or we have some kind of software so that we can actually go and talk to Asian people. We can talk to Russian people.
Oh,
We
yeah.
can to
That'd be great.
everybody
It's been
all
done
around the
already.
world. We can, yeah,
Yeah.
we can have classes with children who grow up with all kinds of people from all over the world. They can learn together and they can speak their own language, and all the other people will hear it in their own language. And so at some point, I think Americans might be have a little fear of Russians. Russians might have a little fear of Americans. And that way, in virtual reality, when we have translators that are working really quickly, we can actually get to know each other and get less afraid of each other. And that's maybe also, maybe if that happens 15 years from now and virtual reality is mainstream and we have these translators, maybe at some point when America says, you know what, Russia, we are in war, maybe so many people in virtual reality will have met each other and are like, you know what,
Oh.
it's not going to happen. I know these people. I see them all the time. I have online adventures with them. There's no way you're getting me to war with these people because I know them. They're always right next to me. Why should we, I think it's going to connect the entire planet really soon from now, but
It's sort of
just
like
a
the
matter
next
of
step
time.
of. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
It's like the next step of like war photography or something. Like war became a lot harder
Yes.
when you would bring footage of it home and people could see the
Yeah.
horrors that were happening overseas or whatever.
Precisely.
And if you can go, if we could all have a meeting where we're all from these different countries that are at war with each other and we're sitting in a room together, acting as if we're human, like it's going to be hard for us to agree with the war that's happening. All right,
Yeah.
great stuff.
If you don't mind, I would like to give homework for everybody.
Okay.
I think there's no way to test this. There's no way to see if you did it. It's all based on your own infinite game. If you're playing the infinite game or not, you'll do this homework. If not, oh well. But I think a good thing for all of us to do is to go home tonight or today, whatever, and think about what we as individuals can do to further the progress of the future. Whether it's talking to those 50 people on our Instagram or whatever, or coming up with a bunch of ideas and sharing that with the group, or talking to our brothers, sisters, and having and inspiring them to do something. Think about all the stuff that we can do, and then go and do it. The very next day. Don't make it a big thing. Just the very next day, do something. I think it's incredibly important to not just talk about it, not just complain about it, but actually take the next step and do something about it.
As you have to turn in a report before the next episode, and we're going to grade your efficiency.
Yeah, if you want to do
Let's
that
do
as
it.
well, then yeah, do that. But no,
I'm
I
ready.
like it. Thank you.
Doja, what were you
All
saying?
right. Cool.
Oh, you're.
No, I was just going to say, like, to the war thing, we saw all sorts of depersonalization in propaganda in World War II, and things like that to make the enemy look, less human. But that just, I don't think that really washes now. That you can immediately get a video feed of the people in other countries, and probably know some already. War is going to get less and less popular.
So there it is. Everything's going to be fine. There's nothing to worry about. Oh wait, Fax, do you have a quick thought here?
Yeah,
We're
I'm just
about
gonna
done.
throw in a pessimistic thing.
No, dude, we're ending.
This is the optimism show.
Yeah. Do you have
Well-
a solution to a problem?
Yeah, I have. We have to be careful about what we do in. Well, not careful. We have to think about what we do in the future, because soon we're gonna have a new explosion of new technology, and
Yeah.
like we had 20 years ago. And we have to be careful about what we do, and we have to bring out the correct technology at the correct time in the future, because we're gonna end up
so
in that bubble.
Be your own ethics board. Think about those things, because everybody's going to have more and more access to more and more powerful tools. So yeah, think about how you use them.
We all can be our own ethics board. So yeah, that's your homework too.
Hey, Stokel,
Alright.
you made it.
Yeah.
All right,
Oh,
goodbye.
hi, Stokel.
Let's do a group
Hello.
photo on the bridge,
Yeah, come on,
maybe.
everyone.
Yay!
Yeah,
Let's get on the bridge.
Just
group
to the
photo.
end.
You can say you were there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I was there.
Let's see.
This
by
counts.
watching
Okay,
the
camera's
video
over
the whole
here.
time.
Ah, right.
Oh, I see. Okay. Is this okay? Can you see me in here?
Are you under the bridge? Oh,
I'll be in the back.
Asylum, get in here.
Asylum, you're not going to get in here?
come on, everyone.
I think she's. Oh wait, I think she's taking a screenshot for the wall there.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
Ah,
Oh,
nice.
cool. We're going to be on the wall.
Yeah.
Is there no
Come
one in
here,
the water
Asylum.
with me?
Optimistic,
Optimistic
future.
Not really.
All right. Thank you, Ghoster. And thank you, everybody. Thanks,
Yay.
Dojo. Thanks, Shadow. You guys were awesome.
Thank
you.
you. That was pretty awesome. This is fun.
I really wish I had more time. Or I didn't have one.
All right.
But I
You're
was
pretty
thinking-
I'm
colorful.
glad you could make it.
Nice.
Anyway.
I was listening to it the
All
whole
right.
time.
Have
I
a
was
great night,
driving.
everybody. It was
Oh,
fun.
good.
All right.
Thank you.
And I literally made it
Okay.
just for the end.
Bye, Shadow.
Sarah
That's
is
right. You
coming
pick
over
on. So thank you
online,
so
I
much,
think.
man. That was great.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
really fun.
Yeah,
All right. I'll see you guys later. I'll talk to you in the
She was
chat.
behind you
Yeah,
when
thank
the
you
event
guys.
started.
That was